Welcome to Spectral Shadows. This is the place where the stories don't just haunt your mind, they follow you into the dark. Before the whispers begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Midnight? Or closer to the hour when shadows move on their own? If you're brave enough to continue, prove it. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows and leave a comment with your time and location, so we'll know exactly where to find you. Now, let's open the door to tonight's nightmare. Story number 1. There was an eye in my wall. From a tiny hole in the brick of my fireplace, the eye stared at me. I could feel it before I could see it. That feeling you get when something hidden is watching you from afar. Then I saw it, the green, irised eye that was just barely visible through the gap in the bricks, as if a face were impossibly trapped in the fireplace. The eye blinked at me, then looked away as if embarrassed. It didn't seem natural, so I got a bit of caulk and sealed the hole. That's better. I rest myself on the couch once again, assimilating into the stillness of this old house. It's lonely here, but no, I'm not so alone, am I? Of course, my wife is here, upstairs, knitting a sweater, I believe. She always makes the most adorable tiny clothes, so that should we have a child someday, we'll already have some made. What days those were. I did love my wife. Yes, it isn't so lonely here. I used to shingle roofs in the mornings. Shingling roofs is hard work, a bit of a lost art nowadays. In my time, we didn't have machines for these sorts of things. I worked through rain and shine, summer and winter, with nothing but a hammer, nails, and a strong will. It's hot out today. My hands are slick with sweat, making it difficult for me to keep a grip on my hammer. I put the nail in place and strike it down with force. Bam! I sort through the box and find another. I put the nail in place and strike it down with force. Bam! It has only gone in halfway this time, so I strike it again. Bam! Much better. I sort through the box and find a new nail, this one a little rusted. I put the nail in place and strike it down with force. Bam! I sort through the box and find another. I put the nail in place and my hand trembles. I try to steady myself, but my hand refuses. My arm bumps like a heartbeat, and a piercing pain pulses through my veins as I stare down at the nail. My breathing wavers for a moment. I hold my breath and reel my hand back, striking the nail down with fury. Bam! A circular dent is left in the shingle. I allow myself to breathe again. Much better. I look upon the completed roof. Not a single imperfection in sight. This was work to be proud of. After I packed up for the day, I went to pick up my son from school. The school was far from our town, so it would be a long ride to get there. He would have been better off closer to home. I tried to tell Sylvia as much, but she insisted that private school would be enriching for him. It wasn't. He didn't belong in that environment, with those teachers, around those stuck-up rich kids. There was too much pressure on him there. It just made him afraid to go to school. Because of that, we ended up with an idiot son. She didn't like it when I said that, but it was true. We did have an idiot son, and it was because of that damned private school. Speaking of which, where is that school now? I've been driving for hours, and I feel like I haven't gotten anywhere. Now that I think about it, I've never seen this road before. How could I have ended up here? The land that surrounds me is flat and desolate, the blackened soil scorched of life. I slow the truck to a stop, attempting to reorient myself. The sun is already beginning to set. I pull out my phone, hoping I can message Sylvia to tell her I'll be home late. To my dismay, the phone is dead. Maybe there's a charger somewhere around here, maybe stuffed in the glove compartment. I open it to check. There is an eye there. I close the glove compartment swiftly. I step out onto the dirt, my boots sinking slightly in the dried, dusty earth. As I begin to look around, there are no other cars on the road, no birds in the sky, no bugs wriggling under my feet, not a single indication of life. But faintly, I see something far away. There is a light off in the distance, far off the road. Without thinking, I begin to walk towards it. The setting sun is still hot as ever, and my throat is becoming dry. I turn to get some water from my truck, but it isn't there anymore. I've already walked many miles away from it. I look up to see the moon shining down on me, stars now dotting the sky far above. I stare up, bewildered, while my legs propel me forward, dragging the rest of my body mindlessly. The dirt grips my boots with every step, but I march forward still. I look to the horizon and see the light once more. Brighter, clearer now. The air becomes thinner the further I go, reeking of burnt wood chips. As it gets closer, the stars that once dotted the sky begin to fade away. One by one they disappear until the sky becomes empty. Above me is a pitch-black void, but the pillar of light in the distance has become ever brighter. One step after another, and I inch forward, closer, 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 closer. The soil beneath me turns into sand as I continue. The dunes roll across the landscape, but they cannot hinder my progress. The sand is blown about by gusts of wind that burn my eyes, which cannot close, lest I let the light out of my view. Step by step, the light becomes closer and closer and closer. Yes, I can feel it now. The golden pillar's warmth is just within reach. But no, I wasn't there. Of course, I was at home with my wife. She was asleep on the couch, an unfinished sweater lying in a ball on her chest. There is an eye poking out from between the cushions. The dreams started that night. While my body lay peaceful and still in my bed, my mind was somewhere far away from there. The dreams were vivid, more real than any dream I'd ever had before. Everything around me was incomprehensible, a swirling vortex of sounds and colors that mixed into a cacophony of noise. But it all felt more real than reality itself. I was falling. When I landed, I was back in my bed, rays of morning sunlight shining into my eyes. I descended the stairs into the living room, trying to shake the strange dream from my head. I found Sylvia there, sitting on the couch and rubbing her temples. She turned towards me as I approached, pulling at her messy black hair. I suddenly felt sick when I saw her face. Something about her felt different. Something in her... No, that's not right. She shines me a bright smile, wisping her perfectly groomed hair away from her eyes. I sit beside her, kissing her on the cheek. "Long night," I say, motioning to the tiny sweater. She giggles, I guess so, she concedes, sighing. I thought I could make some progress on this one after work, but I fell asleep. I nod. The sweater has become bunched up, a messy ball of yarn. Sylvia and I have always wanted kids. We've been trying for some time now. I've always thought that maybe she was too stressed for it. So I told her to take more time for herself and let me do more of the work for her. But ever since I got back home, she's been a lot different. She tells me about dreams she began to have. Dreams where she would meet a sudden and gruesome demise. She says that in them, it feels like her head is caving in on itself. She's paranoid that something bad could happen to her if she isn't careful. Or maybe that something has already happened. I dare not tell her why she feels this way. The workday was long, the laborious shingling robbing me of my energy. Sylvia was there to greet me when I walked into the living room. She stood with her arms crossed, her hair messily drooping behind her ears. The scowl on her face spoke volumes before she ever began to talk. "Where have you been?" she said, her voice hoarse. "Working," I responded tiredly as I collapsed onto the couch. "Working like I do every day. The client's house was a little further away today, if that's what you mean." She scoffed and rolled her eyes. "I can't believe you," she spit. "You've been gone all this time and didn't even—" She continued berating me, her face burning red as she yelled and swung her arms wildly. I sat and observed, hardly retaining any of what she had said. I've never been confrontational when she does this. I find that it only serves to make things worse. Instead, I sat, waiting for her to finish her rant. She grumbled out of the room, mumbling curses to herself as I slumped further into the couch. I was too tired to be frustrated. For a moment, my skin felt moist and sticky, but the feeling subsided quickly. I didn't see Sylvia before I left for work the next morning. The coffee hadn't been made, and I didn't have any time to brew a pot. The drive to the house felt longer than it should have. The roads twisted and turned in odd directions, and the architecture of the neighborhood's houses began to shift. Their roofs curled into spikes. The trees were melting and the asphalt was boiling. The neighborhood began to fade around me, crumbled to dust and blew away in the harsh winds. The air became thin as the landscape morphed into something different, something bright. I knew this place. I know it well. I was falling, falling, falling. No, I wasn't. I was on top of the house, holding a new shingle in place. Then the voice said it again. No, I wasn't. I was on top of the house, holding a new shingle in place. It said. It was my voice. My hands were slicked with sweat, making it difficult for me to keep a grip on my hammer. I put the nail in place and struck it down with force. Bam! "No, that's not right," the voice chimed in. "Didn't I do this already?" Of course I did. I've been shingling roofs for years. I reached into the box to grab a new nail, digging around to find one that hadn't been bent yet. Something cold and wet touches my hand. It's viscous and pulsing. I can feel it crawling up my fingers and oozing into my skin. I pull the nail out of it, the contents of the box sloshing around as I do. I raise my hand up and find that it's become stained red, the liquid dripping from under my fingernails. My eyes dart to the box. There are only a few nails left. I knew I should have gone to the store before I came here. I put the nail in place, making sure to keep it as straight as I can. I look down to find that the shingle has fallen away, and a hole has appeared where it used to be. There is an eye in the hole. I readjust the nail, sticking it into the wide open eye. I push and prod until it sticks to my liking. The nail shifts with the emerald eye as it looks around. I hold it in place, reeling my hammer back and smacking it down. Bam! The sky is dark when I return home. I lost track of time. It really has been a long day. Was it a long day? This is my home, isn't it? Of course it is, but it looks different somehow. The paint has chipped a bit more, and the bushes have become overgrown. Has it really only been a day? No, that's just what the voice says. It says a lot of things, but I know that it's lying to me. I had actually been gone for days, weeks, maybe, a month. I stepped out of the truck and approached the home. I've just been stressed out recently, that's all. It wouldn't be so bad if Sylvia made coffee in the mornings like she used to. How long has it been since I've even seen her? I had been walking towards the house for a minute, but didn't move any closer. The uneven brick path, stretching further forward with every step I took. Maybe if we hadn't spent so much money on some private school, we could have saved to buy a nicer house. Maybe we wouldn't still be in this hole if we would have done what I said. The outer edges of the front door glowed with the crimson hue of a hellfire that burned inside. The smell of smoldering wood was overwhelming. I'm doing all I can, and all I ever hear is complaining from you and Thomas both. Bullshit, Roger, she retorted sternly, stomping her heel into the hardwood floor. You do this all the time now, leaving for days at a time and coming back like nothing happened. What have you been doing all this time? Where have you been? Her hair was frizzy and tangled, skin wrinkled and sagging. More wrinkles and more sagging. The features melted together as she continued yelling. Her voice became distorted, monstrous, like a broken radio playing static. I could hardly understand what she was saying anymore, the awful noise making my ears ring. Her face bubbled, and a giant eye emerged from its center, the skin revolving around it like fish in a pond. All at once, her voice became intelligible again, and she screamed one word clearly. Roger, she shrieked. She screamed again and again and again. Roger, 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 Roger. I could hear her voice all around me. The very walls had begun to speak. They whispered to me tenderly, all in sync with each other. Roger, Roger, Roger. The walls bent and groaned as they too began to bubble and burn, becoming scorched black, like burnt coals. Eyes popped out of the walls like acne, dotting the room like stars in a dark sky. They fell from the ceiling, emerged from the floor, wriggled out from under my boots. Every one of them screamed my name. Roger, Roger, Roger. Sylvia's arms and legs were invaded by a plague of eyes, swiftly spreading across her body and consuming her. Every eye was looking at me. They spoke in unison. Roger, 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 Roger. They are so loud. I can't make them stop. Please, please make it stop. I cried in anguish as the screaming hammered at my eardrums. I held my ears, but it didn't help. Their voices were inside of my head. Roger, 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 Roger. I reached for my tool belt. I grabbed my hammer. I used to shingle roofs in the mornings. Shingling roofs is hard work, a bit of a lost art nowadays. In my time, we didn't have machines for those sorts of things. I grabbed the nail firmly and struck it with all the force I could muster. Bam! I hit it again, and again, and again. Bam, 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 bam. I pushed her over and threw away her hand as she tried to defend herself. Bam, 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 she grabbed my arm, nearly tearing the hammer away from me. This nail was stubborn. I brought the hammer down once more, and her grip loosened. I hit the nail in. I hit it again. I hit it again. Bam, 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 bam. The nail squished and cracked as I continued. I hit it again. I hit it again. I hit it again. My hammer became stuck, lodged deep into the broken shingle. I took deep, shaky breaths as I tried to calm myself, my heart pounding in my ears. Sylvia was there, laying motionless on the floor. No, that's not right, is it? Is it? My hands, my clothes, the hammer, the couch, and the walls were all covered in blood. It soaked into the pillows, dripping down the white and yellow wallpaper. I could taste the iron in the air. The hammer was stuck upright in the cavern I had made in her skull. She was unrecognizable. I looked down at my trembling hands, which were caked in red chunks. This was real. My stomach stirred, and I resisted the urge to vomit. There were no eyes left. None on the walls, none on the ceiling or the floors, none on Sylvia. But somehow I still felt like I was being watched. Thomas stood over us, staring down at the scene completely frozen in awe. Tears fell silently from his eyes, her eyes. His quivering mouth showed fear, and the eyes showed disdain. I hated looking at those eyes. Me and Sylvia had always wanted kids. We'd been trying for some time. This drive reminds me of when I used to take Thomas to school, as much as I hated it at the time. But I'm not driving to the school today. I'm driving away, away from the family, away from the stress, and to somewhere I can't quite put my finger on. It's so dark out. I can barely see where I'm going as a sandstorm blows over my car and scratches my windows. I step hard on the gas and speed. Across the bumpy terrain, the truck jolting up and down as I drive over potholes and stones. I don't know which direction I'm headed, but somehow I know I'm going the right way. I can feel it. When the engine eventually sputters and the truck slows to a halt, I throw the door open and fall out onto the sand, hardly able to stand as the winds push me back to my knees. With every ounce of energy I have, I push forward, slowly marching through the storm. The truck disappears behind a thick wall of yellow fog. The rushing sand cuts deep wounds into my skin, and I can hardly keep it out of my eyes. Up and over the dunes I trek, shambling through the thick fog of sand. In the distance I can see it, the golden pillar growing ever closer, just a little further. I walk and walk and walk until my legs give out, and I stumble to the ground in complete agony. I crawl forward through the pain, through the sand. Every inch forward drives a spike of pain through my entire body, and I heave trying to find oxygen in the sand. When I am incapable of moving my legs, I drag myself forward, my exposed, hands covered in blood from my wounds. I pull forward an inch. I wheeze. I pull forward again, a little less this time, just a little further, just a little further. Then I collapse. I lay sick and weak. I begin to lose track of time, submerged in the ever-growing mounds of sand. Slowly, the rushing winds of the storm begin to silence. Soon, I can feel the rough sands disappearing from under me, the pain in my eyes dissipating. After a long time, I regain strength in my limbs and bring myself to my knees. I can feel my skin sizzling as a blinding light pierces through my eyelids. When they open, the pillar's light consumes my vision. It's radiant, emanating with some divine energy. The pillar dwarfs me completely, reaching up further in the sky than I could ever dream of seeing. It's so impossible gargantuan that it nearly surrounds me. I surrender myself to it and sob. I wallow at its base, marveling at its grandiosity, its absoluteness. I curl forward, throwing my blood-covered hands forward in submission. For the first time in my life, I feel centered, anchored to reality for a brief moment in the presence of this higher being. From the radiance, something emerges, the shape of something that I don't recognize at first. As it approaches, I identify it as the shape of a man, but only the shape of one. He is pure light, a man made of star dust. He emerges from the pillar's core, stepping on air as if walking down steps. He floats in front of me, his face completely indiscernible in the luminescence. Something begins to emit from the man. He speaks to me without speaking, but I understand the words perfectly. Roger, I feel him say, the cadence of his voice unclear to me. What has brought you to me? His voice is calm but booming, echoing across the terrain. I sit up, stifling my tears and gasping for air. I speak the best that I can. I have done bad things. I choke out, bowing my head. I want to be free of this place. Please let me be free of this nightmare. My throat burns from mucus. The man stares down at me, unwavering as I plead. His gaze burns into my soul. He's deliberating, or maybe he takes amusement in my suffering. After a long time, he finally speaks again. You have done bad things, he says. I cannot erase your actions, nor can I erase the memory of those mistakes from your mind. However, I may be able to give you a second chance. My sobbing calms, and I look back up to the man with intrigue. The man continues, I have also been trapped in this place as you are now. What I had looked for here was found, but I became stuck. But you can get me out, and I can bring you to someplace better. You can escape the actions you've committed here and go back to normalcy. Be with your wife again. I sit before the man dumbfounded, considering what he said. Is that possible? Can I really see her again? I have to try. What do I have to do? I ask. The man drifts towards me, reaching his bright hand forward. You just need to focus, he answers. You will know when you arrive there. You will feel it. I cannot take you all the way there myself, but I will guide you. He reaches out further, extending his light-tipped fingers. I shiver, uncertain of what to do next. I'm unsure about the man, but I know what he speaks of. I can feel it, tugging me down. I take a deep, trembling breath and nod. Okay, I respond simply. I reach out to him slowly. My hand almost moves by itself, magnetized to the god that hovers in front of me. Our hands connect, and the man's entire body explodes in light. I suddenly feel myself falling, faster and faster. I fall through hundreds, thousands of layers in seconds. Indescribable shapes and colors flash before my fragile eyes. The beginnings of lives, the deaths of the galaxy, the universe itself reaching out and invading my mind in complete sensory overload. The further I fall, the harder I feel its pull. I fall and fall and fall, and I can feel that I am coming closer, 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 closer. Then everything stops. When I wake up, I am home. Sylvia lays down beside me, the stress of her workday apparent as she collapses in bed and falls asleep almost instantly. I smile as I watch her lay, her chest rising and falling as she rests peacefully. She's different now. Her hair is cleaner, her face is brighter, and her eyes turned blue. She's happier now, like she was when we first met. After all of the ups and downs, it seems like we made it somehow. I begin to feel the weight of the day on my tired muscles as I begin to drift off. I roll over and hold her as I begin to sleep. But just outside of my blurred vision, in the corner of my room, I can still see her eyes watching me from afar. Story number 2. When I first met my neighbor, Ms. Katz, she scared the shit out of me. I was walking up the cracked sidewalk to her front door to introduce myself because I had just finished moving in and wanted to start getting to know my neighbors. The house was uniquely large compared to all of the other homes on the street, adorned with steep slanted roofs and vertical wooden framing, a cacophony of plants bursting over the backyard fence on either side. It was the house that ended the street. The pavement of the road and sidewalk abruptly cut off into grass. The door was thick wood that looked like it weighed a ton. The brass gargoyle door knocker rapped loudly, echoing into the house as I stood for a moment waiting for a reply. I jumped when a creaky voice from my left said, "Hello there, dear." I turned to look down at a cheery old woman's face that was wrinkled in a closed-eyed smile. I was startled. It felt like she had scared me on purpose. The backyard gate slammed shut, and I noticed that the old woman was wiping dirt off her hands. She must have been gardening. "Hello to you as well. I just moved in next door," I said, trying to be friendly. "Welcome to Belmont Avenue. My name is Katrina. Cats just call me Cat's dearie." She opened her eyes and continued smiling, but I was taken aback again. Her eyes were yellow, very yellow. They looked like sickly saucers of spoiled milk. My apprehension turned to empathy for Miss Katz. Yellow eyes can mean liver problems, something my own grandmother had struggled with for years. I just wanted to say hello. "I am going to go get back to unpacking. You should come over for dinner sometime." "Nice meeting you," I said. "I'm sure I will, dearie," Miss Katz said. Then she turned back towards the backyard gate, glancing one more time at me before getting to her gardening, and I went back to my new home, which was filled with boxes that needed my attention. That night, I slept poorly. The house was dead quiet. The only noise was the air conditioning unit kicking on every once in a while. I'm a very light sleeper, so that's why I woke up when a strange noise started permeating through the edges of my sleepy consciousness. There was a sound so quiet that a normal person would have slept through it. I lay covered in my bed, sensitive ears straining to discern what the noise was. It sounded like someone was digging in mud. I sat up, trying to quiet my breathing so I could hear where it was coming from, but my wooden floors made the sound reverberate from all directions in my room. I could not work up the courage to get out of bed and investigate. Something told me I should just lie down and put on some white noise to ignore it. Every night for a week did just that, ignoring the noise and getting some decent sleep. When I asked my other neighbor, Todd, a nice middle-aged truck driver, one day if he had heard the noise, he said he didn't know anything about it. I bet you it's Ms. Katz. You can catch her out pretty late sometimes. Between you and me, I think she has a bit of dementia. Just a bit. She loves her gardening. I've even seen her doing it at night, which is weird, but to each their own. She must love it. She imports special fertilizer all the time. Here comes a truck now. He nodded towards her house. A van pulled into the driveway. It had a purple flower logo on the metal siding that was indeed befitting of a fertilizer company. A burly man dressed in all black greeted Miss Katz at her gate and started carrying brown sacks into her backyard. She noticed us watching and gave a cheery wave to us while we waved back. Todd said, "Really sweet woman. I've known her for years. She's been living on Belmont Avenue as long as anyone can remember. Makes great apple pie." I decided to see the garden for myself that afternoon. I made it look like I was cleaning my gutters, which, to be fair, were disappointingly dirty. No thanks to my landlord. I stood up on my roof to peer over the bushes spilling into my backyard, only then realizing what a jungle Miss Katz's backyard was. Bushes, flowers, vines, short and tall trees, bird baths, stone pathways, you name it. If Miss Katz was really doing it all herself, it had to have taken up all of her time. The garden was in pristine condition, and scattered throughout the yard were the large brown fertilizer sacks, some ripped open with black soil spilling out. There was a smell that rose out of the backyard and drifted towards me as I studied the garden, a sickly sweet stench that was quite pungent. I could see lavender, rose, and dracena flowers, so it was possible they were responsible for the strange odor. Something was wrong, though. A part of my brain was reminded at the time of how my grandfather's large liquid fly traps smelled when they were full to the brim with dead insects. I was also reminded of rancid meat you discovered had been molding in the back of your fridge for weeks. An itch on the back of my neck grew while I was scouting. It took me a minute to notice the yellow eyes peering at me between large, purple curtains out of the corner of my vision. I was startled and turned to look back at Miss Katz, unsure of how long she had been staring at me. She waved and smiled, nodding towards her garden like it were quite special before going inside. I couldn't be sure, but before I turned to face her, I could have sworn she was looking at me with a face contorted in utter hatred. It was 9 nights ago when I watched Miss Katz die. When I woke, I was confused. I could make out the soft noise from nights before that still somehow demanded every ounce of my attention. I looked to my nightstand and realized my phone was not playing my white noise. I must have forgotten to turn it on. I decided it was time to confront Ms. Katz. If she really did have dementia, maybe I could just talk to her, and she would realize she should be asleep and not doing whatever weird shit she was doing in the middle of the night. I crept through the house, slowly opening the back door. The sound of crickets and rustling leaves mixed with the digging noise that was now sharp and clear. I could not stop myself from approaching a peephole in the fence. When I was a few spans from the fence, the sound suddenly stopped. I froze, waiting. A rhythmic thumping noise started coming down over the fence. What was she up to now? I had to know what she was doing. One eye closed, I peered through the hole into the backyard. The backyard looked like it did when I last saw it. Winding stone paths now illuminated by moonlight. More fertilizer bags were open, and the garden beds were torn up like plants were being rearranged. I quickly found her. Miss Katz was on a ladder pulling at one of the fertilizer bags, which was stuck in one of her second-story windows. Pulling does not properly describe the motion. Miss Katz was throwing her body weight faster than seemed possible away from the window, the bag inching with each heave. She thrashed again and again and again. It looked like it hurt. It looked like her. Arms should have dislocated. I started panicking. Clearly, Miss Katz had more than a little bit of dementia. Like Todd had said, I needed to help her, to get her to a hospital and make sure she was mentally sound. But it was too late. Suddenly, Miss Katz lost her grip on the bag. The cloth, tearing from the tensile force, and in an instant, was falling off the ladder. She was weightless, air whipping her stained nightgown about while she plummeted. A pit formed in my stomach when I saw where she would land, the inevitable becoming more terrifying with each second. Splat. One of the short concrete bird baths that had a pointed house had completely pierced the abdomen of the elderly woman. I stood frozen while I processed what was happening. Not a single cry was uttered. Her death was instant. A hole the size of a basketball oozing blood where her stomach had been made me fall to my knees and retch into the grass. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 as I started frantically searching for my dinky-ass Walgreens first aid kit. An operator picked up. The operator asked in a calm voice, "Woman, what is your emergency?" "My neighbor is dead. She fell off a ladder and impaled herself on a bird bath," I yelled, panting as I sprinted down the sidewalk. The operator was clearly used to these kinds of calls. "Okay, slow down, sir. What is the address?" "4 Belmont Avenue. Please hurry. Please," I stammered out as fast as I could. "What is her name, sir?" "Katrina Katz. She's bleeding, please." "Sir, is this a joke?" "What do you mean? I'm telling you the truth." I stopped in my tracks. I was so high on adrenaline I couldn't understand what was happening. We've had at least 8 calls like this in the past year. Miss Katz has always been fine when we respond. "I don't understand." "She is an elderly lady who does not need this harassment. I will not repeat myself. If you call again, I am sending an officer to arrest you for misuse of the 911 line. Goodbye." The operator hung up. The only sound left was my heavy breathing. I found myself walking towards the backyard gate. My momentum was the only thing that kept me going. I pushed open the gate, scanning the backyard. There was no ladder lying on the ground. Miss Katz was gone. Somehow, she was not skewered on the bird bath, as she had been a minute ago. I kept moving forward, unable to stop myself from approaching the bird bath. It was clean. Its undisturbed state mocked my fear and panic. There was no blood, But when I touched the concrete bird bathhouse, it was warm. I felt a pit in my stomach. The world was spinning around me. My head was pounding. "Dear, what are you doing this time of night?" a sweet voice said. I whipped around. I felt like I was sinking into hysteria. The back door stood open, the wooden arch frame filled by Ms. Katz's figure. There was no obvious sign of a gaping stomach wound. She appeared to have just woken up. She was looking at me, concern plain on the wrinkles of her face. I could see into the house. A few old lamps were turned on. I could just make out some ornate furniture covered in dust. The inside of the house certainly matched the outside. There was something that caught my eye. It was one of the large fertilizer bags with the purple flower logo. Torn open and spilling over a wooden table onto the floor, the bag was not full of black soil. The bag was full of bright flesh, indiscriminate chunks glistening in the lamplight. "Dear," I said. "Are you okay?" Miss Katz yelled, snapping my eyes away from the bag of flesh. She was no longer a sweet old woman who wanted to make sure I was all right. Her yellow eyes were strained open, demanding an answer from me, an explanation. I thought. I stood there, mouth working. I couldn't think. I heard some commotion. I wanted to make sure everything was all right. I stammered out. It seemed impossible that I was talking to someone whom I had just seen die. I felt nauseous. Doubt was flooding my mind. Was this real? Was I dreaming? Miss Katz's face eased into her usual sweet smile. "No commotion, dear. I promise you everything is all right. Go back home and get some rest. I am sure you will forget all about it in the morning." She looked at me, still smiling, but the smile did not reach her eyes. "It's late. People go missing at night, so you better be careful." She turned and slammed the door. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I turned on every light in the house and locked myself in my bedroom. I played the events of the night over and over again in my head. Every time I convinced myself it was real, I would convince myself I must have dreamed it, had some kind of lucid nightmare. But nightmares don't leave 911 calls on your phone history or dirt strung throughout your house. Nightmares don't live next door. In my shaken state, come morning, the only thing to do was to go to work. Work was consistent, and I figured it would sort things out for me to pretend everything was normal. After I downed a third cup of coffee, I strode out the door. The sun catching on morning fog welcomed me to a new day. Todd stepped out of his door right after me. We nodded to each other. Todd's expression soured when he saw something behind me. "None of my damn business," Todd grumbled around a cigarette in his lips. I turned to see what he had seen. A van with a large purple flower logo was backed up to Miss Katz's house. A few men unloading fertilizer bags. A part of me wanted to be drawn back into the events of last night. I pushed it down. I decided Todd was right. It was not any of my business. A full day of work set me back to a sense of normalcy. Pushing pencils for 8 hours really clears your mind. That night was silent, and I slept sounder than a hibernating bear without the need for a white noise machine. I waved to Miss Katz when I saw her on my excursions out of the house. She often was garbed in gardening clothes, going in and out of her backyard. None of my business. For 6 days, all was well, until I woke up 3 nights ago, soaked in sweat, muffled screaming filling my room. I once had a friend of mine lose his arm. We were playing on some rocks in a forest during a camping trip, jumping back and forth between larger boulders, taking turns giving chase to one another. I was laughing while I chased my friend, both of us grinning ear to ear while we played. My friend was climbing higher and higher up the slope of the mountain, taking each gap in one big stride at a time, taunting me to catch him. Just before my little pointer finger could reach out and tag him, he lost his footing and slipped. I watched as my friend fell towards the ground below and stood frozen as he began screaming in pain, bloody arm raised in the air, bone snapped in half at the forearm, sharp white bone dangling in two directions. I'd never heard so much pain expressed before. My friend screamed until his voice was raw, thrashing about on a rock below. If I had acted sooner, running down the mountain to grab our parents, my friend might have saved his arm, but as a kid I just stood frozen to the spot, unable to move. I was frozen then in my bed as I listened to the pain unfolding before me. Help me, please. Oh God, oh God. It was muffled. The words could just barely be made out, but the pain was sharp and visceral. A part of me wanted to roll over, turn on the white noise machine, and pretend I hadn't heard anything, but I knew what I was going to do. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, forcing myself to take one step after another towards the house next door. There was no doubt this time. This was real. I needed to be braver, to not freeze, to help this person. The screaming grew clearer as I approached the house, slid through the gate, and approached the back door. I'm so sorry, I promise. The voice screeched. It was definitely coming from her house. I had to stop whatever was going on. I reached for the door, knife held at the ready, swallowing when my hand grabbed the knurled knob and began to twist. I can't. The yelling suddenly cut off, stillness now deafening. Somehow the hinges of the door slid across each other smoothly, silently revealing the darkness of the house. Once inside, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding as quietly as possible. I moved through the room, past the old furniture, subconsciously aware of the bags of flesh strewn about, of the smell of death so rank I would normally empty the contents of my stomach, passing old pieces of furniture covered in must. I found myself walking on kitchen tile, then rounding a doorway to face a steep wooden stairway. Time started falling forward on a fixed track. I was floating up the stairs. I barely noticed the loud thud that sounded like a deflated basketball being dropped. Heat radiated from above. I was entering a tropical oven. The plaster of the walls was damp and rotted, wood molding visible in bare patches. A squelching noise started coming from upstairs and washing down over me. I continued to move slowly towards the noise. At the top of the stairs was a hallway with closed side rooms and an open door at the end of the hall. The room behind the door illuminated by a sickly yellow ceiling light, creeping out into the hall. Before I knew it, I swung the door open, revealing the horrible scene inside. It has taken me these days, since that night, to rationalize what I saw behind the door at the end of the hallway. In the moment my brain put my body into shock, I continued to act, but I was not comprehending how absolutely horrifying it all was. The floor was covered in dirt and flesh. The two substances were mixed together to form a paste that was thick and gelatinous. Miss Katz's head was staring at me, upside down in the mush, eyeless sockets fixed in my direction. The decapitated head looked something like a pale jack-o'-lantern after weeks in the sun. All of the flesh had been scooped out from the inside. I could see through the eye sockets into the pale skull. The base of the head, where the neck should be, revealed a perfectly calcified circle that looked like a doll head might when you wrung it off of the body. A spacious cavity where a brain should be. I peeled my eyes from the ground and looked forward. A table was in the middle of the room. The rest of Miss Katz was hunched over the table, sitting on an old wooden stool. Her body was convulsing as something I couldn't see was ripping into the chest of a dead body sprawled on the table. It must have been the person I had gone to save. Slurping and crunching filled the room. There was screaming. It took me a second to realize that I was screaming. Slowly, the rest of Miss Katz sat up from the table in the chair, out of the stump of her neck. What looked like a slender frayed rope started stretching upward towards the ceiling. Brown and glistening like an insect carapace, slowly its head started rising from the dead body on the table, pulled upward until it was almost touching the ceiling. Tendrils roughly a foot in length sprouted like fuzzy antennas in all directions along the vine-like neck. They constantly moved and twitched as they felt their surroundings. The head was covered in the same wriggly feelers, blacker than those on the neck. Once the head had risen almost 5 feet in the air, towering above me as an unholy obelisk, it twisted around to stare down at me. Insect mandibles twitched and chomped, flesh smeared and stuck to the mouth area, falling down to the ground with thick splashes. The head was smaller than the discarded shell of a head on the ground by my feet. But the eyes were the same. The yellow eyes were large, bulging out of the hard carapace, with no eyelids to conceal their bulbous shape. Its eyes were fixed on me. Pure malice, penetrating me to my core. The next few moments occurred in the blink of an eye. Rapidly, the tendrils of the neck started pulling the creature back into Miss Katz. Each tendril would shoot down into the old woman's body, accelerating the head downward. Sporadic jerks animated her corpse, arms shooting out, a seizure of movements unfolding before me until the insectoid head was the only visible part of the parasite, resting on the body's neck. Stump, all was still. A standoff had begun. In shock, I was rooted to the spot. A pit of dread opened up in my stomach, and I became aware of my heart pounding in my ears. It leapt toward me, pushing off the ground so hard I heard the floor break, crashing into me with force enough to break my ribs, sending us hurtling back through the hallway towards the stairs. On the ground, we struggled. I somehow managed to grab its shoulders and pushed with all of my strength as it tried to pop my head open with its layers of jaws. A full-throated roar came out of me, and I heaved us down the stairs. Each step smacked on the way down, and at the bottom, I rolled into the kitchen onto my back. I had broken ribs and an ankle twisted the wrong direction, so all I could do was crawl backwards from the stairwell door, where I could hear snapping sounds that meant it was getting up. It forced Miss Katz's body to its feet, one arm dislocated and jutting upward, standing naked in the dark doorway. A fleshy stomach hole was filled with twisted knots of insectoid spaghetti. where the bird bath had pierced through the body. Its eyes were two yellow orbs of light, swaying back and forth in the darkness of the doorway. I noticed a shovel at my feet and frantically grabbed for it. I was too late. In the same moment I made my move, some of the knotted tendrils of Miss Katz's stomach wound, shot out towards me. The wet tendrils were thick and flew across the kitchen, striking my left shoulder and digging into my flesh. The muscles of the arm seized. My muscles were forced to contract harder than my brain would allow. Every single muscle cramped at the same time. My biceps relaxed as my triceps continued to flex, which caused my arm to hyperextend. Bones cracked and my arm broke. I cried out in pain. "Oh dear, I love the way you scream." It spoke to me with a voice that was broken, full of hateful mirth. It sounded like Miss Katz was speaking while gargling crumbled bones. Suddenly my biceps flexed, snapping my arm the other way, my limp hand smacking into my shoulder. All I could do was grind my teeth and moan. With my free arm holding the shove, I swung at the tendrils, severing them. It let out an ear-blistering screech, insectoid head thrashing. Enraged, it crouched, then lunged for me once more. I was ready this time. Screaming my throat raw, I swung the shovel and hit it right between its eyes. One instant, the shiny black mouth was going to tear my throat out. The next, the carapace exploded, green slop flying in all directions. The body went limp and oozed all over me, tendrils seeping out over me onto the ground. The pungent smell of Miss Katz's body, old perfume and rotting insect meat singed my nostrils. I could barely breathe with all of the weight bearing down on me. My shock wore off and panic set in. I frantically tried to push the corpse off of me, my hands slipping again and again, suffocating, instigating desperation deep within me, allowing me to drain the last of my strength to finally roll it off myself. Then I lay alone in the silent house. I started sobbing. I took massive, uncontrollable heaves of air into my body and let them out through tears and groans. I could not stop until every last possible emotion had been wailed out of me. Once I was done, I stood numbly, used the shovel to limp my way out of the house and packed a bag. I got into my car and rode out at dawn. After a stop at the local urgent care, where I told a true enough story about a bad fall down some stairs, I had a boot for my foot and bandages for my ribs. I drove as far as I could and stopped at a motel. 3 days later, I am now writing from my third motel, slowly making my way back home, where I am going to try to forget all of this mess and start over. I am not sure what happened to Miss Katz's house or the bodies inside, and I don't care. I needed to tell my story online because no one I know will believe me, and because I am not sure if I will live to tell the tale anyway. Every motel that I have stopped at has the same van that parks in the back of the lot at 3 a.m. when I should be asleep and not notice. A van with a purple flower logo. They leave at 6 a.m. before I should wake up. I noticed each time because I have not slept since that night. I know I have nightmares waiting for me when I finally crash, but I am not ready to face them yet. Story number 3. I was at the bus stop when I had a moment to check my phone. I responded to several messages from friends and family. then frowned. There was a message from me, from my work number to my personal number. Shit. I usually send myself messages as reminders to remember to bring certain stuff to work, to send an email, etc. I wondered what I might have forgotten to pack as I opened the message thread. It was a voice message. I frowned. I don't usually leave voice messages. I popped in my earphones and played it. Jen, this is me, Jen, but the intact one. They've carved out your memories, suppressed them, wiped him from existence. There's so much you don't remember. You have to remember. Please just... The recording cut off there. I stared at the message in shock. I didn't remember recording that voice message, but it was my voice. Entirely mine. Unmistakably mine. There was something incredibly unsettling about hearing your voice saying words you didn't say. Then I sucked in a breath of relief. AI. That was probably it. My phone had probably been hacked. A scammer was sending me an AI-constructed voice message. I felt a tingle of unease. The AI voice was so accurate, but at least the mystery was solved. The bus came then, and I put it out of my mind. I would reformat my phone later at night. I reformatted my phone, but the messages kept coming, always with the same ominous messages, that I had forgotten a large part of my life, that I had forgotten a whole person, someone important to me, that they had suppressed my memories. They weren't even creative about it. I mean, when a scam isn't working, try something else, right? I took it to a tech guy who couldn't figure it out. I didn't want to buy a new phone, so I just ignored the messages. The annoying thing was that sometimes I ignored my own messages of reminders because of that. I only began to fear when I first lost time. One minute I was in a taxi, staring into space, mind grazing on whatever pointless topics. The next I was at a random building somewhere in the city, at a part of the city I've never been to before. I had no idea how I got there. When did I get out of the taxi? Did I pay the driver? Did I bus? How long had I been standing there? I looked at the building before me. Nothing out of the ordinary. The typical gray, gloomy facade of industrial buildings where dreams go to die. I left. Walking to the nearest bus stop, my knee gave out at one point, but I caught myself before I fell. I sat at the seat and clasped my shaking hands together. What happened? Why did I not remember? The sky was nearly dark. I looked at my phone. I had lost about 4 hours. Hours are completely unaccounted for. That's when I saw it. Another voice. Message. I squashed my rising fear and played it. Jen, you stubborn bitch. Listen to me, for fuck's sake. Wake up. This is not a joke, not a prank, not a scam, nothing like that. This is real. Do you not remember him? Dean. How could you forget? I don't care what they did to your brain. You ought to remember him. Anyway, your body, your emotions. Isn't there any inkling of who Dean, the love of your life, might have been? I paused the message. Dean. Was I crazy? Was I imagining it? Was I getting swayed by this scammer? Because I felt a tug in my heart upon hearing his name. I thought I saw a ghost of a silhouette in my mind. I shook my head and played the rest of the message. I'm you. I'm the you who has all the memories. Just believe me. For fuck's sake, they suppressed me, but I'm here. I can only reach you, reach my own body, our body, when you're in a semi-unconscious state, like a dream state. Even gaining control of your body in that state took me months, and you just kept waking up after a short time. This time, though, it's been an hour. I still have control over my hour body. Maybe with time, I can regain full control. I can get myself back, the real Jen, with the real memories. I recoiled and shut off the message. She was going to take over my body? A faint whisper of logic kicked in. She's not real. She's a scammer, an AI recreation of my voice. A really amazing, faithful recreation, but not me, nonetheless. But I couldn't believe that whisper. I felt it in my gut. The other Jen was telling the truth. I gulped and pulled up the message again. Played it to the end. I don't know why they killed Dean. Why did they erase him from our minds? Well, your mind. I don't know who they are. But I've a vague inkling. Dean had told us about it. Remember? That he was onto something that would blow things up. People will be shooketh, was what he said. Everyone in the world would be shooketh. Remember that? I thought hard. Again, it felt like I had heard those phrases before. I felt a familiar irritation at the use of the word shooketh. Was I making things up? The recording went on. Then he was killed. Then one day, I was here, trapped in your mind. I watched as you went about life, not grieving Dean, acting like he never existed, and I tried to reach you, but I couldn't. Not until a while back. I've been trying to do some research whenever I got hold of our body. I've been trying to find the past messages and emails from Dean. They're all gone. I tried to find out who might have done this to us. I posted about our situation on the web, under pseudonyms, with VPN. I gaped. That would explain why I had sudden VPN charges, and someone mentioned having a friend with a similar experience, that it was linked to this company, Elaxia. The thing about Elaxia is, it doesn't have an address or a website, but I got in touch with someone, and they shared a location, an industrial building downtown. I'm headed to it right now. Hopefully I retain control long enough to find something out. Wish me luck, and please, just fucking stop ignoring my messages. All of them are completely fake names. Jen, Dean, Elaxia. I'm not dumb. I'm not gonna get caught this way, now that I know they're monitoring everything. I shut my eyes and took a few deep breaths. I needed to calm down, to think logically. Could anyone have erased my memories of someone entirely? Wouldn't my friends know? Wouldn't others remember? Him, I was alone in this city. I've been here 9 months. I've made no good friends yet, but I have friendly colleagues. I don't talk about personal stuff often with them. I don't tell my family much, beyond reassuring them that my life here is awesome, and I'm settling in well. But I talk to my bestie back home about my life. I'm sure I would have talked to her about this Dean, if he existed. I pulled out my phone and texted my bestie. Did I ever talk to you about a Dean? I was nearly home when she responded. No, why? Who's this Dean? No then. There's no way I would not have told her about a supposed love of my life. So this was all bullshit. Right? I went to bed early, but I couldn't sleep until 2 a.m. My mind was racing. I was also terrified of other Jen taking hold of my body. I awoke with a start. My neighbor's dog was barking like crazy. I was on the floor of the living room. My head was pounding, like someone had wrapped it in an ever-shrinking helmet. What the hell had other Jen done? I stood up and stumbled. What was that smell? Gas, all of a sudden I was wide awake. I scrambled for the door, falling a couple of times, then crawling to it and flinging it open. I flopped out into the corridor and crawled farther down. My neighbor's door opened, and I could hear him yelling at his dog, something about not refusing walks in the afternoon if he was going to holler the neighborhood awake at night for a walk. He saw me sprawled on the ground of the corridor and rushed to help me up. We ended up waiting downstairs as the police and other personnel arrived. Our immediate neighbors were evacuated, and it took a good 2 hours before we were allowed back home. Apparently, a gas leak had occurred in only my apartment, with no other damage in the building's gas lines. You better believe I bought the highest quality kibble for that dog the next day, and gave it the world's longest scritches, but misfortune kept following me. I was nearly hit by a car. Some kindly Samaritan yanked me out of the way. A taxi I was in had its engine catch fire. Both the driver and I barely made it out before it exploded. I was lucky the driver had incredibly quick thinking. The moment he noticed some smoke, he veered to a road shoulder and ordered me out of the car with him. It blew up seconds after. Had never seen an engine go from smoking to boom in such a short time before. I kept accumulating people I owed great debts to. Other Jen messaged often. She apologized for being naive, thinking Avamien would successfully mask our activities online. She claimed that my bestie had her memories erased, too. But it was a drawing she made that sucker punched me in the gut. She had used AI to create a portrait of Dean. She said it was close as she could prompt it. Looking at that portrait, I felt something squeeze in my chest, and warm tears tingled my eyes. I looked at that face, and I knew there was once a Dean, right? Jen told me our time was limited, that they had found out that other Jen existed, that they had run out of ethical fucks to give. Apparently, erasing my memory, wiping Dean from existence, was their way of being ethical. They weren't villains, or so they liked to think. That was Elaxia's MO. They would do whatever it takes to obtain their objective, but where possible, they liked to avoid murder. But they were happy to do it when necessary. My recent actions, or rather, those of other Gens, had put a mark on me. I had to go. I just hoped I hadn't painted a target on my bestie's back. By even mentioning Dean, the police didn't believe a word of what I was saying. And by going to the police, I had made it known to official authorities that I knew about what these people had done. To me, to Dean. Someone's in my apartment. I can hear them. They're trying to be stealthy, but I recognize that muffled slide of socks on the ground. I've a nail gun ready. That was all I could get. And a baseball bat. And some beer bottles for throwing. I'm going to call the police. But once I do, and speak aloud to the police, I believe they will attack. I wish I could leave other Jen a goodbye message. A floorboard creaked. Right outside my door, I'm hitting post. Wish me luck. Story number 4. The town I grew up in was strange. That statement typically garners a fair bit of narrative intrigue when I say it in person, but peculiar childhoods seem to be alarmingly common among the contributors that skulk about this particular forum, so allow me to be more specific. My hometown was professionally strange. 5.5 square miles of humble farmland that doubled as a hotbed for the unexplainable and the uncanny. Strangeness was our lifeblood, the beating heart of our economy, attracting tourists from 3 states over with rumors of the closely kept secrets lurking within our one-of-a-kind showroom. An orphanage for the enigmatically aberrant that was, simply titled Curbside Emporium. That strangeness used to be the love of my life. Now I'm starting to suspect it'll be my tomb. But hey, it isn't all bad news. At least I'll finally be a part of it. That is what I wanted, right? The way my parents tell the story. Curbside Emporium was my first true passion. Something that really put life behind my eyes. To borrow a lovingly dumb expression from my dad, the mystique of the various oddities seemingly bonked my consciousness into second gear. Makes it sound like I was an exceptionally dull toddler before that day, glazed over and fashionably disinterested, until I glimpsed Miss Sapphire, the world's only sparkling blue tapeworm, and then Viola. I was awakened. Not to veer too far off track, but have you ever heard of the Mutter Museum? It's a lovely little gallery, nestled in a quaint section of Philadelphia's downtown, collecting and curating a wonderful assortment of oddities. The lady whose body turned to soap, the world's largest colon, a plaster cast of two conjoined twins. Curbside Emporium, and by extension my hometown, are certainly comparable. The amount of strange things stuffed within a single location, the raw density of it all, inspired a deep thrum of nostalgia within me when I visited the Mutter Museum for my cousin's wedding a few months back. Yes, you can, in fact, get married there. Why in God's name would you want to? Well, if it reminded me of home, it must have reminded my cousin and his high school sweetheart of home, too. And that's probably as good a reason as any to select a venue. Plus, Curbside Emporium doesn't have a reception hall. There's one key difference between the two, however. The Mutter Museum imports its strangeness from all over the globe. Thus, from my hometown, we've never had a need to outsource like that. Strangeness springs up around us like weeds, whether we like it or not. Let's put it this way. Whatever cosmic radiation stirs within the waters of the Bermuda Triangle, that same radiation seems to stir within the soil of our small, podunk stretch of land. Assuming you believe the anomalous exhibitions aren't a series of well-intentioned hoaxes, of course. As a kid, that thought never even crossed my mind. It felt like a lie, too cruel to even exist. Family and friends quickly learned that disbelief was akin to blasphemy in my eyes. My parents sidestepped many a screaming match between my older sister and me by prophylactically outlawing Curbside Emporium talk at the dinner table. Begrudgingly, I complied. As long as she didn't disparage those consecrated halls, then I wouldn't argue she had shit for brains. Tit for tat. To be clear, though, she was right to be skeptical. First off, the unassuming layout and hokey decor didn't exactly scream scientific integrity. It was the second tallest building in town, squeezed tightly between the fire station and our local burger joint, marked by a piece of ostentatious neon signage that rose unnecessarily high into the air. I loved pretty much everything about Curbside Emporium, excluding that damn sign. It made no earthly sense. The nearest interstate was 10 miles away, and the tallest building in town was the adjacent fire station. Who was the elevation for? Birds? Angels? Distracted, low-flying biplane pilots? Not only that, but the fluorescent green bulbs cost a small fortune and were prone to malfunction. For them all to work at once was nothing short of a miracle. The first R burnt out for what seemed like my entire freshman year of high school, making the sign read Cubside Emporium, which, to be perfectly frank, just sounds like a very odd, very specific porn outlet. Now I get it was meant to be symbolic, not practical, a signal to visitors that Curbside Emporium was clearly the crown jewel of our otherwise no-name town. Still, the building itself was in a state of perpetual disrepair. Why not siphon money from the sign towards fixing the crumbling foundation, or eradicating the carpenter worm larvae that chew up the floorboards every winter? But I digress. Disrepair didn't dampen the magic. Not for me, anyway. Walking through those oversized double doors, those towering slabs of dark oak that divided the dullness of the real world from the brilliant shimmer of dreamlike possibility, never failed to lift my spirits. The lobby set the tone for the showroom to come, with a palpable air of mystery and an abundance of kitschy charm. Shadows flickered in the dim lighting, provided by scattered, gold-plated oil lamps and a centrally hung electric candelabra with telescoping rows of gold teeth that glowed above the swathes of eager patrons. The color scheme leaned heavily on deep reds and dull golds, which made the room look simultaneously regal and cheap. A burgundy-colored carpet that could easily hide a spilled glass of Merlot or a bloodstain within its fibers. Gold tassels on the curtain separating the lobby from the showroom that matched the gold threads embroidered into the curtain itself. Unlabeled knickknacks devoured every inch of wall space. At first glance, the ornamentation could appear chaotic. The more you looked, however, the more it seemed to fit together like pieces to a puzzle, implying some perverse method to the madness. Feathers dangled off the rim of a dream catcher to fill the U-shaped emptiness framed by the antlers of a taxidermy deer's head below. The borders of scenic painting fit snugly between the legs of an antique artisan's bench, which the owners had bolted upright, extending laterally from the wall behind where Mr. Baker operated the ticket counter. Mr. Baker, to my knowledge, is the only confirmed employee of Curbside Emporium, a gaunt, joyless corpse of a man, always sporting a black tuxedo, an off-white button-down, and a golden cummerbund. Tickets cost at least $10, although you're technically permitted and subtly encouraged to give over 10, as long as that amount is an even number. Mr. Baker won't accept odd-numbered donations. Most people pay 10 on the dot, but I've seen bills as large as 100 deposited into the enormous gold cash register by Mr. Baker's skeletal, liver-spotted hands. Why would you pay over 10? Well, the simple answer is that it's good karma to support local businesses. There are more convoluted answers, of course. Baseless conspiracies, spurred on by the message written in gold lettering above the curtain that leads to the showroom. The more of yourself that you give, the more of yourself that you'll see. Once, you push through the thick crimson fabric and enter the cavernous showroom. The Gilded Age aesthetic disappears completely. Instead, the presentation is very plain and down to brass tacks, with wood panel flooring, eggshell-colored walls, and natural light provided through a trio of large windows along the wall farthest from the curtain. To me, this sharp contrast has always felt logical. The lobby establishes mystique via its flamboyant interior design. The showroom, in comparison, needs no crutch. The exhibitions speak for themselves. I've already mentioned my favorite, Miss Sapphire. Don't get me wrong, I'm no tapeworm enthusiast. The creature's bluish, crystalline exterior did little to mitigate the bubbling nausea I experienced when I imagined all 32 inches of it squishing around some poor cow's intestines. No, I was enraptured by the idea of it being one of a kind. That idiosyncratic quality really struck a chord with me. It made the creature seem powerful and oddly important. There's only one extra long, blue-tinged tapeworm, and hey, you're looking right at it. Bow your head and pay your respects to the first and last of its kind. Not to mention the way they displayed Miss Sapphire helped romanticize the creature. Its segmented body held gracefully in the air by lines of nearly invisible string, with a watercolor illustration of a starry night attached to the inside of its glass box, acting as a scenic backdrop, which I think was meant to evoke the image of a traditional Chinese dragon flying over the countryside rather than a parasite swimming through filth. And that's just a sample. There are the blackened bones of a man and a boy, which, presumably, fell from the sky and landed in our town back in the 80s, although no one actually witnessed a descent. No missing person reports could explain them. No commercial and/or private planes were traveling overhead early that morning. A young woman, Erica, discovered the skeletons as she was walking her dog. As dawn broke, she saw them lying side by side on Curbside Emporium's front lawn, holding hands, vacant sockets peering up at the unseen. Onlookers assumed they were father and son, based on the size difference, their clasped hands, and their narrow hips. Once the sheriff had been sufficiently convinced that they represented something anomalous, rather than something acutely murderous, the strange bodies were added to the collection, and since Erica was the first to lay eyes on them, Mr. Baker granted her the distinct honor of naming them. She went with the first thing that came to mind, cheerfully admitting her lack of creativity. Thus she christened the bones Atticus and Finch, having just finished To Kill a Mockingbird for high school English. Of course, Atticus and Jem would have technically been more appropriate, given that the remains were canonically related, a father and his son. But she claimed those names didn't feel right. No one pushed back against the decision. She found them, so the responsibility of naming them was hers, and hers alone. That's the rule. You get a plaque engraved with your name posted below the exhibition, too. There's a framed black and white photograph showing a farmer listed simply as Jim, leaning on a downturned pitchfork planted in the ground like a flag, beside a small circular patch of earth blurred with motion, as if spinning. He named the phenomenon flush dirt on account of the soil's toilet-like churning. Supposedly, his boot sank into it like quicksand when he stumbled upon the anomali. Only lasted for a day or two before the ground's physical properties spontaneously reverted to normal. There's Philip and his wooden flute that for a brief time, when played, supposedly emitted noises that sounded like human speech in an unknown language rather than its normal whistling. More than a little disturbed, Philip happily gifted the instrument to Curbside Emporium, but refused to play along with the tradition, offering no name for the anomaly. According to the mythos, when Mr. Baker prompted him a fourth time, unwilling to take the thing off his hands without a name, Philip replied, "Listen, I don't want to." From then on, The flute became known as Listen, I Don't Want To, which had an oddly appropriate ring to it, given the backstory. Every bit of it was magic. Every story, every relic, every inch of that place spoke to me. So, when I was finally old enough to wander about town without supervision, my mission became clear. I was going to find something anomalous. I was going to have a plaque with my name carved on it. I was going to earn my place in the showroom. In the end, I succeeded in achieving those goals, but only partially. I discovered something wildly inexplicable, a story worthy of Curbside Emporium. I don't believe I'll be getting my plaque, though. Not in the way I imagined it, at least. When I first conceived of my so-called expeditions, they were not such. A lonely affair. Sometimes I had more than a dozen kids following my lead, digging holes, overturning rocks, looking towards the sky for the first glimpses of more heaven-rejected bones, hoping to catch wind of an oddity. For them, though, it was a fad. Something to be discarded once a new, shinier hobby came along. Years passed, and the team shrank. The number of kids I considered friends dwindled into the single digits. By the time I turned 10, it was just me and Riley, and he only came because I was so damn insistent. Eventually, even Riley had become fed up with the pursuit, but unlike the others, we remained friends, despite our diverging interests. Honestly, my parents were more worried about my social situation than I was. They didn't want to witness their son tread the path of the outcast, consumed by what they considered a fruitless passion. Sure, I missed the banter, missed the sense of belonging, too. The rejection was more than a little painful. There was an upside to the solitude, though, something I didn't mention to my parents. If I were the only person on an expedition, that meant I didn't have to share the credit when I inevitably found something. More plaque space for my name. More glory for me. I could tell my fanaticism scared them. It was in the way their faces contorted when I gushed about Curbside Emporium, all shifting eyes and half smiles, like they didn't want to support the hobby, but they didn't want to strike me down either. Unspoken prayers that the fire would go out just as long as they didn't give it any more oxygen. I certainly didn't soothe their concern when I returned from one of my first solo expeditions with a discovery in my backpack, beaming with pride. I can't believe it. Honestly, I can't believe it. But I think I found something. The first of its kind. Do you have Mr. Baker's number? I need to donate it right away before it gets rotten. I'm going to name him Volcano Bug, I think. The blunt but forceful odor of decay exploded from my backpack as I unzipped it and unveiled my discovery. Reluctantly, I allowed my father to examine the dead critter, holding it upside down by the tip of its tail and spinning it. Enough, Dad. We gotta call him. We gotta call him quick, I pleaded. If it wasn't obvious from the specimen alone, the shrill anxiety creeping into my voice likely gave me away. Needless to say, we didn't phone Mr. Baker regarding the salamander corpse, imperfectly coated in Sharpie ink. Later that evening, when my tears had dried, I admitted to drawing over the creature's scales posthumously, desperate to find an anomaly at any cost. The only thing that saved me from a much more significant punishment was that they believed me, or mostly believed me, when I claimed I hadn't killed the lizard specifically to fuel the lie, which was true, by the way. I'd stumbled upon the body, face down, stuck in the small crevice between the sidewalk and the nearby dirt. From there, The scheme crystallized quickly. I feverishly went to work, watching myself scrape the marker over its brittle flesh like my mind was outside my body, lost within some terrible fugue state, a soul possessed. So, when I finally found my anomaly, as opposed to fabricating one, I knew I had to be absolutely irrevocably sure of its strangeness before I told anyone else, especially my parents. That discovery would come 4 years later. I was trekking along the eastern edge of town, engulfed in the song Zero by the Smashing Pumpkins, blaring from my new wraparound headphones, a gift I'd received for my 14th birthday the week prior. Technically speaking, I shouldn't have been searching there. The strangeness of my hometown did not immunize it from life's harsher realities. We, like many of Pennsylvania's small communities, struggled with heroin abuse, and the poor, souls who succumbed to the drug's siren call, insulated themselves on our town's eastern perimeter, injecting within the safety of its rundown infrastructure. My parents forbade me from wandering around that area, especially since I was alone most of the time. Naturally, I still searched the eastern side of town periodically, ignoring the agreed-upon restriction without a second thought. How could I resist to know that there was a part of town unexplored, potentially harboring an anomaly that would have driven me up a fucking wall? I couldn't limit my search. That said, I didn't want them to worry, so I pretended to honor their request. When I found it, it wasn't what I expected. It couldn't be seen, couldn't be heard. No, my beautiful anomaly was something you felt. The air was cool, but it seethed with the hidden electricity of an impending storm, though the sky was bright and cloudless. The soles of my feet ached from traversing the crumbling sidewalk, with its uneven cracks and jagged slopes. The nearest house was a quarter-mile down the road, an empty ranchero with mostly boarded-up windows that served as a map marker. Once I reached that dusty ghost of a home, even I knew it was time to turn around. I was gazing up at the sky, that perfectly empty blue abyss, when I felt it. All of a sudden, my heartbeat turned rapid. Wild, boundless fear gnawed at the base of my skull. Sweat dripped down my torso by the bucketful, pouring from me at a rate that seemed liable to send me to the hospital, critically dehydrated, starved kidneys screaming for water. It was all so automatic. I leapt backwards, sneaker, catching on a crack in the terrain, nearly causing me to tumble to the broken ground ass first. My mind attempted to catch up with my body, scanning the horizon, eyes hunting for whatever threat had sent my nervous system into manic overdrive. A flock of blackbirds cawed somewhere above me. Wind blustered over my skin, turning my sweat icy. Electricity writhed within the atmosphere, making the hairs on my arms stand at attention. But there were still no visible signs of an imminent storm, no visible signs of anything, actually. The entire scene was motionless, bland, and docile. It didn't make sense. It didn't match what I felt. Where was the danger? What in God's name had I just become attuned to? That's when it hit me. Pangs of excitement thumped within my chest. Whatever this is, it could be my anomaly, I thought. So against my instincts, I crept forward, tiptoed over the weeds springing from the shattered sidewalk, slowly, carefully. My fear rose accordingly. Every step inspired another ounce of terror, but for the life of me, I couldn't determine why. One more step, and my hands trembled. 2 more steps, and my vision softened, blurring, dimming. 3 more, and I'd reached my limit. I physically couldn't force myself further. Once again, I scanned my surroundings. It must be right here. If I can't push myself forward, this is it. It's got to be right in front of me. I peered down. At first, all I saw was a normal, thoroughly unremarkable square of sidewalk. But that's just it. The concrete was normal, uncracked, clean. No invading shrubbery, no cigarette butts, no brown crystal shards that once formed a beer bottle. It was perfectly normal, so much so that it was distinctly out of place. I squatted down, sat on my haunches, and inspected it closer. Watched the damn thing like I was waiting for it to flinch, and thus would be required, by the laws of the cosmos, to divulge its arcane secrets. After 10 minutes, my calves started to burn, so I sat down and crossed my legs, still observing the potential anomaly with a retrospectively embarrassing level of intensity, never once letting my eyes wander. Hours passed. The perfect sidewalk refused to flinch, and I still couldn't step on it without experiencing immediate, mind-melting panic. Trust me, I tried. As the sun dipped down, threatening night, I considered leaving, but the story of Jim and his flush dirt flashed through my mind, and I recalled his phenomenon had spontaneously disappeared after a day or so. That fact kept me tightly glued to the ground. I wouldn't allow it to slip through my fingers. The thought of missing my opportunity made me feel decidedly ill. I just needed to figure out what I was looking at, or, at the very least, determine how to document it. As if the universe heard my prayers, a line of black ants emerged from the dirt and began silently traversing the blemish-free concrete, seemingly unbothered by whatever was holding me back. I watched them with bated breath. They started their march at the left-hand corner, closest to me, continuing diagonally across the sidewalk. Suddenly, the one leading the charge pivoted course, although there was nothing blocking their path. The turn was awkward, unnatural. The insect reared on its hind 2 legs and spun its body 90 degrees to the right. When the ants trailing behind the first reached that same spot, they pivoted too, identically. I sprang to my feet, biting my nails, starstruck by what was transpiring. The strange pivots continued, all sharp and unprompted, each mirrored by the insect that followed. After a few minutes, a black shape began to materialize. This half-circle with 2 stout pegged protrusions, outlined by the procession of living dots. More soldiers crawled from the grass, and more of the image emerged. Eventually, the last of the line dragged itself from the earth and onto the concrete. To my absolute astonishment, they seemed to have the perfect number of volunteers. When the last ant pivoted, the first was there to connect them all together. The shape was complete. The march stayed strong, and the pivots continued. So, the Yabip shape never lost its form. An oval with 3 closely clustered pegs on top, and 2 more distantly spaced pegs on the bottom. 5-toed cog twisting within the belly of some divine machine. The whoosh of a passing truck sundered my hypnosis, and I came crashing back to reality. Just seeing it wouldn't be enough. I needed proof. I bolted towards home. I figured I could spare the few seconds required to keep my parents off my back when I didn't come home that night. I swung open the screen door and screamed, "Staying at Riley's tonight." Didn't stay for their response. Both cars were parked in the driveway. One of them must have heard me. Plus, they'd been pestering me to spend more time with friends anyway. Doubt they would have told me no. As the orange glow of twilight began to dim, I sprinted to Riley's. He was the only person I knew who owned a camera, and the only person who still had a faint, lingering interest in Curbside Emporium. I was confident I could convince him to lie to his parents, tell them he was sleeping at my house. With a seemingly heavy heart, he trudged from his stoop to grab his digital camera, agreeing to accompany me across town in the dead of night because of me. He'd never return home. Because of my obsession, he'd never sleep in his own bed again. I used to feel ashamed about my involvement in his disappearance, though, as of late, I don't know that I have regrets. Don't know that I have any regrets at all. A shape made of ants? Riley asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. Grass crunched beneath our boots. The moonless night provided meager illumination. Still, I could tell Riley was smirking like an idiot. Listen, it'll make more sense when you see. It, I replied, but he cut me off. Was the shape a middle finger? That would scare me too. I sighed, but threw a sheepish grin. Wow, yeah, how'd you know? Dipshit. I chuckled and gave him a gentle push. "Oh, dude, watch it, collarbone," he remarked theatrically. "God, man, that was 2 years ago. When am I finally going? To be let off the hook? Never. The fracture may be healed, but my mental scars, Lord have mercy, they ache," he said, adopting a southern twang for the last few words. Riley was tall, athletically gifted, and, as far as I could tell, fairly handsome. He had all the ingredients to develop social standing. Because of that, I wasn't too surprised when he started phasing himself out of my expeditions. A tiny bit hurt, yes, but not shocked. Riley was a good friend. He wanted to keep me around, in spite of my desperately uncool interests, so he browbeat me into attempting some more mainstream hobbies. To that end, his family took me snowboarding in the Poconos one winter. I was a goddamn mess on the slopes. Crashed into Riley and sent him chest first into the trunk of a tree, turning his collarbone to rubble. Shattered the bone into 8 distinct pieces. From then on, we agreed to keep our hobbies separate while remaining friends. Common ground be damned. Maybe if you weren't so menopausal, the bone wouldn't have completely disintegrated. Things brittle as fuck. I mean, 8 screws? Really? You needed 8 screws to hold that toothpick together? He pushed me back, laughing. For a moment, I forgot about everything. Curbside Emporium, the relentless pursuit of strangeness to call my own, the ants, and the shape, and the sidewalk. For once, I wasn't trapped in the endless labyrinth of obsession. I just felt warm, unabashedly, transcendently warm, which made what Riley said next hurt that much more. Yeah, well, at least I don't spend all my free time walking around town by myself, searching for make-believe like a loser. Based on his inflection, I don't think he intended the statement to be so pointed. A slip of the tongue. Regardless, the damage was done. I said nothing in response. We were close to our destination. I put my head down and just kept walking. For all his positive traits, Riley had one major flaw. He was stubborn to a fault and prone to doubling down. Oh, come on, man. Don't be a baby. You have to know that it's fake. No scientist is verifying that shit. Whoever owns the place doesn't let anyone test the stuff like a real museum. It's all just, I don't know, smoke and mirrors, sleight of hand. It's a trick. Dejection curdled in my gut, like decades-old milk, transforming into an emotion I'd never felt before. Rage. You'll see, asshole, I whispered. Then I ran ahead, out of the grass and onto the sidewalk. We were only a block away. The most vulnerable piece of myself needed to beat him there, confirm it was real, which would mean that it was all real, and Riley would have no choice but to eat his goddamn words. My sneakers squeaked against the uneven concrete. Crisp night air inflated my lungs by the gulpful. Static electricity sizzled over my exposed skin. As I felt the faintest echoes of fear, I began to slow my pace, sprinting to jogging to just plodding forward while breathing heavy. The fear rose, seething, setting my blood on fire. Eventually, abruptly, I hit an impasse, physically incapable of pressing forward, and there it was. A perfectly normal slab of concrete, a lonely raft adrift in a sea of decay. But there wasn't a single ant to be seen. I felt myself deflate. I could practically hear my confidence hissing like a tea kettle as it leaked through my pores, rising into the night, never to be seen again. Before I could sink too deep in the mires of self-loathing, something startled me. From about 50 feet away, Riley was shouting, but the message made no sense. "Hey, who is that?" Quickly I spun around, did a full 360-degree rotation. There was the boarded-up house at the end of the road, the field we'd been walking through to arrive at the eastern edge of town, the flickering street lamps, and nothing else. Not a soul to be seen anywhere. "Are you all right?" he bellowed. "Seriously, who the fuck is that? Standing behind you?" A little delirious, I shrugged, chuckled, cupped my hands over my mouth, and shouted back at him. "Genuinely." I paused for a moment, panting. "I have no idea what you're talking about." He started barreling towards me, shoulders angled like a quarterback. All I really felt in that moment was disorientation. That changed once Riley was close enough that I could appreciate his expression under the sickly glow of the street lamps. His eyes were wide. His skin had turned, table salt white. The muscles in his face looked taut, almost spastic. Riley was terrified. Moreover, he could see something, someone, on the sidewalk behind me. Someone who made him worry for my safety. Someone who looked dangerous. Right as it all began sinking in, there was a shift in Riley's demeanor. In the blink of an eye, he'd stopped charging, sprinting with abandon one moment, walking gingerly the next. His panic disappeared, leaving his face unsettlingly blank. My head swiveled between the perfect sidewalk and my friend, side to side, back and forth, trying to understand what he was witnessing and what it was doing to him. He was about to pass right by me when I put my hand on his breastbone and held him there. His heart rate was slow, downright languid. but it was incredibly forceful. Each beat practically detonated inside his chest, pulses reverberating up my arm every few seconds. What's happening, Riley? I pleaded. His eyes were open, but only slightly. He's been waiting for me, he stated. Words failed me. Felt like my throat was caving in on itself. The five-toed man says, "It's my time." I kept my hand on his chest, clasped his wrist in my other hand, and gently began tugging him away. "Riley, this was a mistake. We need to go." Briefly, it seemed like I was making headway, although his eyes remained fixed on that perfect bit of sidewalk. His legs were moving with mine, away from whatever was luring him closer. Then I heard the last thing he ever said to me. "Don't worry, it'll be your time. Soon enough." He gripped his digital camera tightly, like it was a stone, and in one smooth motion, sent it crashing into my head. I collapsed, falling from the sidewalk onto the road, groaning, vision swimming. Sticky warmth trickled down my temple. When my eyes focused, all I could see was the night sky, moonless and grim. Riley grabbed my hands and dragged me off the street, back onto the sidewalk, laying me at the foot of the anomaly, the five-toed man, like an offering. The word wait quietly spilled from my lips, but it fell on deaf ears. I saw the silhouette of my best friend, arc the blood-stained camera over his shoulder. I didn't even feel an impact. The world just faded away. When I came to, it was morning. The woman who owned our town's pharmacy was kneeling beside me, asking what happened, asking if I was all right, her truck idling nearby. Memories of the night before trickled in painfully, a cheese grater rubbing against my concussed brain. "Where's, Riley?" I muttered. Before the ambulance arrived, I was able to get myself upright. I stumbled to where I thought that perfect bit of sidewalk was, but to my horror, there was nothing. All the concrete was equally dilapidated. Whatever had been there before was gone. Later that week, I found myself in a police station being interrogated about Riley's disappearance. "What drugs were you both on?" I stared at the officer, eyes wide with disbelief. "We weren't on anything. I haven't even had beer before, let alone drugs." He clicked his tongue and shook his head. "Really? Y'all were sober? Sober on the east side? Taking pictures of yourself in the middle of the night?" My heart fell into my stomach like an anvil. "What do you mean, pictures?" He pulled 4 high-quality printouts from a manila envelope and threw them in front of me. They were all almost identical. We were standing on the sidewalk, arms around each other's shoulders, looking into the lens, only visible from the waists up due to the way the shots were angled. Looking at the empty air above our shoulders made me squirm. In each picture, Riley's face was concealed behind by what appeared to be motion blur. My face, on the other hand, was cleanly visible. I was smiling, blood streaks glinting against the camera's flash. Who could take thousands of pictures? Pictures like these, sober? I... My voice trailed off. Finally, he asked the question that's plagued my broken psyche for decades. "Who's behind the camera, taking the photos? Who else was with you that night?" To the officer's frustration, to my parents' utter disappointment, and to Riley's parents' absolute indignation, I didn't have an answer. I didn't have a name to give. I still don't, so I said nothing. Riley was pronounced legally dead 2 years later. The town assumed he got caught, up in the drug trade somehow, kidnapped and killed because he owed the wrong person money. I knew that wasn't true, but I couldn't provide a better truth, so that became his story. But I think I found the better truth. It was inside Curbside Emporium all along. Like I mentioned, at the beginning, I attended my cousin's wedding in Philadelphia a few months back. I hadn't planned on attending. As soon as I turned 18, I left Pennsylvania with no intention of returning. Out of the blue, though, my cousin called me, practically begged me to attend, claiming the family missed me. So I relented. Sure didn't feel like they missed me at the wedding, though. Everyone leering in my direction with that all-too-familiar look of thinly veiled disgust. Even my cousin seemed to be surprised to see me, which was a little bizarre. Only got more bizarre when I thanked him for convincing me to come to the reception. He denied ever calling me in the first place. From there, though, it was already too late. The seal was broken. My trajectory felt inevitable, no matter how much I wanted to resist. Yesterday, I handed Mr. Baker a $100 bill, pulled back the curtain, and walked into the showroom. It wasn't so bad. Not nearly as bad as I imagined it would be, I guess. In fact, the nostalgia was sort of sedating. Took my time wandering around. It was all exactly as I left it. I even grinned when I passed by Miss Sapphire. Eventually, I found myself in front of Atticus and Finch, those blackened, anomalous bones that seemingly fell from the sky in the 80s. It was never my favorite exhibit, so I had no intention of lingering. But a faint shimmer caught my eye. I tried to ignore it, but I still ended up standing in front of the glass, squinting at the shimmer. Don't know how long I just stood there, eyes glazed over and catatonic. I'd never noticed the shimmer before. It certainly couldn't have been new. How could I have never noticed it before? I rubbed my eyes, mashed them around in their sockets until their soft jelly hurt. Even slapped myself across the face once. No matter what I did, though, the shimmer didn't change. The light was reflecting off something buried in Finch. The smaller of the pair, a gleaming drop of silver jutting slightly from his collarbone. There was no denying it. It was a screw. My neck creaked forward. I was standing in such a way that my reflection overlapped with the other larger skeleton, Atticus. We seemed to be a perfect fit. I haven't slept since. I know that I'll return to the east side of town. Eventually, I will. Because it feels like it's about my time. The five-toed man is going to make something out of me. Something important. I never got my name on a plaque, but I suppose, in a way, this is better. Honestly, I'm just happy to know that I'll be with Riley again. We'll fall through the atmosphere together. Land in front of the Curbside Emporium together. And maybe if I'm lucky, if Riley's forgiven me, we'll look up into the sky together, and I'll feel that perfect warmth again. Story number 5. Don't upvote this. Don't reply. Every single interaction shifts my reality a little further, and I don't know what happens when there's nothing left to shift. I know how it sounds, but I'm not joking. I'm writing this because every time someone responds to me online, my apartment changes. Small at first, the couch cushion flipped, a mug rotated handle out instead of in, but now it's impossible to ignore. I should stop typing. I should stay offline entirely. But I'm terrified of forgetting. I'm terrified that if I stop documenting, the changes will become permanent and no one will know. I need someone to know what's happening. That's why I'm posting. It started 2 weeks ago. A coworker texted me, "Okay," at 9:03 p.m. I checked my phone at 9:04, and when I glanced toward the kitchen, the clock was gone. Just gone. Screw holes in the wall where it hung, nothing else. It was at that moment that I made the connection of the odd changes possibly being connected with interaction with me via technology. I thought I was losing it. Curiosity made me test it. I made a throwaway account and asked strangers to comment. Every single reply shifted something. A picture frame rotated 45 degrees. A dining chair slid closer to the door. My toothbrush multiplied. Now there were 2 of them sitting in the holder, both damp, both streaked with the exact same bit of toothpaste. That's when I stopped. Too risky. Then my girlfriend, Sam, started texting. Hundreds of messages over 2 hours. I know that's excessive, but we were already in a rocky place before all this happened. She hates when I don't respond right away. I know, kind of toxic, but that's another issue that I'm not worried about at the moment. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I knew if I opened any reply, anything she said could trigger another change. But ignoring her only made her panic, and the notifications kept piling up. When I finally braved my phone to silence the notifications, my apartment had transformed. The living room rug was draped across the ceiling, stretched tight and thin, like a skin. It shouldn't have been able to stretch like that without ripping. The couch was flipped upside down, and the fridge had somehow moved into my bedroom, humming against the wall beside my bed. The outlet itself that the fridge was plugged into was stuck firmly into the side of my bed frame. I have no idea how it was still running. The worst part was the faint sound of drawers slamming again and again, even though every single one of them stood wide open. She didn't know what she'd done. I never replied. I haven't told Sam. I can't. I can't risk her texts again. I haven't called my brother either. I want someone close to notice if I disappear, but I can't let them trigger more changes. I tried documenting the pattern. The changes aren't random. They depend on the volume and timing of the interactions. One comment by itself makes small shifts, but a flood of activity all at once causes reality to unravel faster. That's why Sam's barrage of messages nearly destroyed my apartment in one night. And it's not just objects anymore. Yesterday, after 3 upvotes on a test post, I walked into my bathroom and didn't recognize my reflection. It was me, but out of sync, half a second behind my movements, grinning when I wasn't. I've started keeping a notebook, recording every interaction and every alteration. But the writing is changing, too. Last night, I opened the notebook and the ink from older entries had rearranged itself into a single sentence. Keep going. I don't know why I keep posting. Maybe I need proof. Maybe I need witnesses. Maybe it's a cry for help. But every comment, every upvote, every interaction accelerates the chaos. I can feel the apartment, know the space around me, reacting. Objects rearrange while I'm typing. My chair just scraped an inch across the floor on its own. I see Sam's notifications still coming through. 30 new messages. I can't answer. I can't risk it. I won't. My hands shake as I type. The light outside my window hums louder, pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. Though my apartment is on the 4th floor and no streetlight should be that close, I know it's coming. The longer I post, the more changes will occur. I don't know if the changes are permanent or if they're even bound to my apartment. I don't know if reality itself is starting to bend around me. But if I disappear tonight, if my reflection becomes someone else entirely, maybe you'll see this and understand. Maybe someone, somewhere, will see the warning. Please, whatever you do, don't reply. Don't upvote. Just read and remember. I checked my reflection one more time tonight, and it was smiling at me. I'm going to do everything in my power to make this a single post. I can't change any more online presence anymore. If things get too crazy and something happens that I have no choice but to tell the world, I might make an update. If things somehow calm down and all of this stops, I'll let you know, too. In the meantime, please keep quiet on my posts. It could be harmful to the very fabric of our reality if you don't. Story number 6. I don't know where else to turn. Last month, I started my new job at the coffee shop. The pay was not all that much, but every bit helps. All of the customers seemed plain to start out with. But there's this one customer I can't understand. Today, every night at 11, this guy comes in. He looks wild-eyed and creepy. I didn't want to serve him, but the boss says to serve everyone willing to pay. His voice started to become strange. I thought it was nothing. Maybe it was how the shop sounded. I even called my boss, but they just brushed it off. Then his voice got weirder. I thought it was the hiss of the espresso machine, the steam twisting the words in my head. It wasn't only one voice anymore. It was quite hard to make out. But the quiet voice was calling me by name, over and over. He was saying, "Help me." I tried to be rational. I even recorded it. I pulled out my cell phone to record it. See if it was the white noise you hear from the coffee machine. It might have been that I was tired. Later on, when he was not near, I played his voice again. It wasn't one additional voice. It was 5, all trying to come out at the same throat. I played it back for my boss the next morning. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me it was the espresso machine. He just gave me this look, like he'd heard it before. "Don't talk about it," he said. His voice was low, flat. That guy's been coming in for years. He leaned closer, glancing at the door as if the customer might walk in any second. I went to the cops once. They said no crime had been committed, no law against whatever this is. Then he just walked away, like the conversation had never happened. I didn't get any sleep that day. The next time I saw him, I recorded him again. The additional voices weren't saying, "Help me." They were calling out my name. I panicked. I told the boss I was going on break. He looked like he understood. That night, the customer was taken care of. He paid, sat in his usual seat, then left without a word. Nothing happened, at least not out loud. But it gave me an idea. If audio picked up the voices, what would the video show? So the next night, I propped my phone on the counter and hit record while I served him. I tried to act normal, smile, and hand him his coffee. Then later, I glanced at the screen. That's when I dropped the phone. On video, his face wasn't a face at all. It was a blur, like a deck of photos shuffled too fast. Dozens of different mouths, different eyes, different people, all smeared together and flickering with every frame. And some of them were staring straight at the camera. The next night, I couldn't bring myself to record him again. I was afraid of what I would see. I shoved my phone deep in my pocket and tried to act normal. I kept telling myself it was a trick of the camera, a bad screen or recording errors. But then something happened that I can't explain away. He didn't come in. 11 o'clock passed. Midnight. The shop was empty except for me and the buzz of the lights. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt watched. I was on cleanup duty that night. And then about 3 in the morning, I heard it. Not from him. Not from the door. From the speakers in the ceiling. The ones that play soft jazz after closing. My name? Bobby W5 voices whispering at once. Tangled. Overlapping. The same ones from the recordings. They didn't stop until I shut off the power. I don't know what to do now. I can't sleep. I can't even walk into the shop without feeling like they're waiting for me. And if I'm honest, I don't think they're confined to that man anymore. I think they followed me home. Story number 7. The shit below is a 100% real. I'm a 17-year-old guy living in a city called Tumkur, Karnataka, India back. In April 2024, right after my 10th board exams, my parents and I went on a family trip to Goa with their friends. The drive from Tumkur is long, so we stayed a night in Shivamogga, saw Jog Falls, and eventually reached Karwar by 4 in the afternoon. We could have pushed on to Goa, but my dad said Karwar Beach was just as good, and finding a hotel at night in Goa would be messy, so we checked into a 4-star place about 500-600 meters from Rabindranath Tagore Beach. It was part of a shopping complex, basement parking, supermarket and tech stores on the ground floor, shops on the first, offices on the second, a dental clinic on the third, then the hotel lobby on the 5th. That evening, we hit the beach, came back, freshened up, and then walked to a restaurant called Shweta Lunch Home for dinner. After stuffing myself, I wanted to head back quickly, but my parents lingered for dessert. So I went ahead alone. Here's where things get strange. When we checked in earlier, I'd noticed a security guard on the ground floor. But this time, nothing. The whole complex was dark and empty. Shutters pulled down. I remembered I'd left my earbuds in the car, so I went down into the basement to grab them. The lighting was dim, and the silence pressed in heavily. I snatched the earbuds and ran up to the ground floor for the lift. This was no ordinary lift. It was a glass elevator right in the center of the complex. I stepped in and pressed for the 5th floor. The first thing I noticed was movement. Something like a shadow darted across the stairwell with impossible speed, straight up to the 1st floor. My chest tightened. The doors opened on the 1st floor. Nobody was there, but the lift had been called. I swear I heard the button click. I stayed still. That shadow flickered again. 2nd floor. Again the lift stopped. This time I saw something. More than a shadow. 2 glowing eyes, staring from inside a darkened office. They didn't move. They didn't blink. By the 3rd floor, I was trembling. The doors slid open, and I saw a figure through the glass. A body, tall, easily 6 feet, standing in one of the office spaces. It didn't step forward, just stared, its eyes locked on me. I wasn't ready for the fourth floor. My mind screamed, "Don't look," so I squeezed my eyes shut. When the doors opened, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. My throat caught like I was trying to scream, but no sound came. My knees gave way, and I collapsed inside the elevator. When the lift finally reached the fifth floor, the hotel lobby staff saw me on the floor and rushed over. I must have looked pathetic, but in that moment I was grateful to see actual people. I stumbled into my room, locked the door, and sat frozen in the bathroom. Even as I tried to calm myself, I kept the bathroom door wide open because closing it felt worse. I don't know what I saw in that elevator, but I'll never forget those eyes watching me. You've reached the end, but the shadows haven't left you. If this story unsettled you, prove you survived. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with the part that haunted you most. The darkness is always waiting, and so are we. Until next time, don't turn off the lights.